humans aren't born out of laying around on their asses. We're the dominant species. We built all this. We're powerful, and we're beautiful, and we're ready to build the next level of civilization in God's plan. If you love God and you want to build a pro-human future, you must become the victor. But you have to believe in yourself first. This is the truth, and everyone knows it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about economics and international trade. Don't tune out just yet. It's actually more exciting than it sounds. So there are people on the internet that clearly, very, very clearly, do not understand economics. They don't understand tariffs. And most shockingly, they don't understand the disparity between numbers. You see, they see 25%. Trump says 25%. And then Trudeau comes out and says, well, we're going to tax you 25%. And they're like, that's even. That's like they're both getting taxed 25%. However, if you tax somebody 25% on $1 versus 25% on $1 billion, these two things are not the same. And that concept right there is apparently too complicated for people to understand. We're going to watch two videos, one of which is from somebody who makes sense on this, and somebody else is a Canadian. That's the other video that we are going to watch. But what I want to say about this is that the illiteracy on economics is absolutely startling. I have seen so many people talking about this sort of trade war. This is not a trade war. You understand? Canada and Mexico combined make up less than 5% of America's GDP. 5% combined. Do you want to take a guess at what the American impact on Canada and Mexico is? So when it comes to Canada, it's about 25%. 25%. Not 2.5%, 25%. Now, when it comes to Mexico, it's a lot higher than that. So if you think this is going to be a trade war, you're insane. Here's what's going to happen. The goods that are tariffed from Canada to the US, the American people are just not going to buy. So that is going to absolutely obliterate Canada, which, by the way, deserves it. Now, I know you may not have expected me to say that. You people have elected Trudeau, which is an unconscionable sin, for years. I admit our fault was electing Biden for 4 years, but we corrected our mistake. You never did. You continued to vote for this authoritarian, left-wing piece of garbage over and over, and all the while pretending like, he's kind of bad, but you didn't do anything about it. You let this guy be in power for over 10 years. So if you want to blame anyone for your current predicament, it's not Trump, it's not America, it's you. You've taken advantage of this country for too long, and finally Donald Trump says enough. You've allowed enough fentanyl and enough illegal aliens to enter into this country that basically the gravy train is over. Now, before we get into this video, I want to make something abundantly clear, because there are people who are just absolutely brain dead, saying that if Canada stops giving us oil, it will turn off our energy. That could not be further from the truth. First of all, it makes America more energy independent, so less reliant on foreign governments. Trump wants to drill, baby drill, and get more energy flowing from our country, which is a positive. But I want you to understand, the oil that Canada sells us is oil that is basically unusable to them. They don't have the technology to refine it. It's essentially tar. It's like one of the worst grades of oil that we get from them. We have the refineries to basically turn it into something usable. So a product that would be absolutely useless to the Canadians, they sell it to us at a discount. because it's otherwise worthless to them. We buy it on the cheap, we refine it, we transport it, we do all that stuff. We pay it at our expense, and then we, have cheaper oil. But if we were to stop buying that oil, the Canadian economy would collapse. And it wouldn't be like this long-term thing. And here's the deal. If we were to stop buying Canadian and Mexican products, it would have an infinitesimal impact on our economy. So I want to make this perfectly clear. This isn't a trade war. This is a couple of chihuahuas are barking at a polar bear, and somehow people are treating it like it's an equivalency. No, you're going to get crushed, and you deserve to be crushed. First of all, booing America's anthem, that right there, I would have put 100% tariff on you. You are in no position to be booing us about anything. You have let liberal Democrats ruin your country. You become an embarrassment across the world. What you let that government do to those truckers, so at this point, even if you didn't sell us the oil and said, we're going to do it ourselves, your environmental policies would make it impossible for you to do that. Canada, you are not even in this fight. You're a chihuahua barking at a polar bear. And you exist at our leisure. I want you to understand that you exist at our pleasure and at our leisure. You don't have the military. I'm not saying that we're going to invade Canada, but you don't have a military. I mean, it's infinitesimally small. You can't defend yourself. Your economy can't sustain itself. You exist purely based on us. And then you wanna boo our anthem? If I were Trump, I'd say, okay, you want to boo us? You want to treat this like it's a joke? You want to elect liberal MPs and PMs, and you want to elect these leftists? Fine, 100% tariff, and it may go up. It won't affect us. It'll affect you. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, you liberal fruitcakes. See a lot of you crying over tariffs, saying it's going to destroy the economy. Want to look at trade economics? First, a tariff is a tax imposed on a country's imported goods and services. The United States only imports 15% of goods and services internationally. The rest is domestic.
Yep. So, of everything that is imported, Canada makes up less than 5%.
Now, a lot of you are concerned about what's happening with Canada and Mexico. Well, you remember that 15% I talked about? Canada and Mexico only produce 5% of that. That means between both of them, they only produce 5% of the United States GDP. Yeah. So guess what? This trade war is going to turn both of those places into a third world country.
And by the way, I also want to mention the fact that Trump is imposing tariffs and also at the same time slashing taxes for Americans. So if you brain-dead, degenerate retards don't understand that the effect on the American citizen is going to be negligible, no taxes on overtime, wants to end federal income tax, like all the taxes that Trump wants to cut is going to have a real benefit. And then at the same time, these tariffs, the country is going to be bringing in millions and millions and millions of dollars. So anyone who says that this is a trade war is just fooling themselves. It's ego. It's pride. You're not even in this fight. You're not even in this fight. It's like watching Logan Paul fight Mike Tyson in his prime. Oh yeah, I could take him. No, you can't. And the fact that you would even try and then blame Mike Tyson for, like, decapitating him with a single punch, you're trying to blame us. You want to boo the American national anthem. You want to boo Americans. This is a result of your failed leadership, the people that you elected in. Trump made it very clear. Shut down the border. Shut down the fentanyl coming in. Shut down the wave of illegals. And Trudeau said no. And your government said no. Well, here's the consequence of your own actions. We're going to crush you.
Although Mexico already is one. Now the reality is we don't want that. But the United States is tired of being taken advantage of by the countries who are refusing to pay their fair share. And we all know you guys want fair share. And tariffs are a way of achieving that. Now let's look at Canada. 20% of the GDP of Canada comes from the United States trade agreements.
It's 25.
And 75% of their trade happens with the United States.
Oh,
now that means if prices go up because of imported goods from Canada, Americans are going to refuse to buy them.
Yep.
Meaning, Canada's not going to make any money. And as we're 75% of their trade, that's going to be detrimental to their economy. And Mexico doesn't even remotely have a leg to stand on, with 40% of their GDP tied into American export.
Yep.
Now I know you're going to say that Canada's threatened to turn off power to Americans. Well, we'll just raise the tariff. They're not going to turn it off. Do you know why? Because Canada's utilities is $55 billion in debt, which means they can't afford to turn off the United States' power.
I honestly don't think people in Canada and even some people in the United States understand the vast might of the American economy and just how insignificant Canada's economy is. The economy of Texas alone is bigger than the economy of Canada. I want you to just understand that. Because the word trade war, the media uses it because they're like, oh, this trade war. We're talking about two countries that are essentially rounding errors. Do you understand? That's why this is so incredulous to me, that we're even talking about it this way. A 25% tariff from the United States, there's nothing that Canada has that we can't get somewhere else and get it for cheaper and get a better product, no matter where it is. Because that is the might of the American military. We could ship it across the world. I mean, the idea that Canada has some kind of influence, what really should be happening is Canadians should be saying, okay, our government has failed. We should be doing everything we can to ingratiate ourselves to the U.S. But instead, you think you're going to become a sovereign and independent country? That's rich.
Now you're going to say that other countries are going to stop trading with America. Well, they only make up 10% of the GDP of the United States. And we'll just pull funding from NATO. Because we fund 75% of that. Which means all of them would have to cut their social services. Like Canada paying reparations rather than investing in their own military.
Yeah, you guys are retarded. Genuinely retarded. All your social programs and reparations and taking guns away. You guys are freaks. We would be doing you a favor if we invaded you at this point.
They didn't. They spend more money on social services than investing in their own military.
True.
The reality is tariffs are good when coupled with tax cuts for the United States.
True.
Yes, it will be inflationary. The numbers that we're seeing are about 0.5%.
Yeah.
But coupled with the elimination of income tax, it would be negligible to the United States. So stop crying. Tariffs provide leverage, and America is going to put America first.
True.
We're going to be fine.
Yep.
Stop your fear-mongering. If you like my content, please like, share, and follow. Have a good day.
He does a good job of laying it all out. But you see the media. You see, I don't know if you can see it right here, but this particular thing says Canada versus U.S., the tariff tug of war. It's not a war. It's not a war. Do you understand? It would be like if Donald Trump would be like, we're declaring war on Haiti. It'd be like, why? There's no war. There'd be no war with Haiti. We'd arrive and it'd already be over. Somebody would look at Haiti and be like, oh my God, like, look at the devastation. Like, no, actually, we didn't even start yet. Canada does not have the capital or the infrastructure to go to a trade war with the U.S. You have had liberal Democrats ruin your country with regulations, with environmental regulations, with taxes and taxes and taxes and taxes and taxes. You don't have the refineries. You don't have anything other than wood, lumber. And we can get that from elsewhere. We don't need your maple syrup. We don't need your lumber. We'll get it somewhere else. We don't even need your crude. The fact is, we don't need you. And the more that people turn this into a trade war because they don't like Trump, the more that it becomes obvious that this whole thing is just simply people who don't like Trump coping with the fact that he's putting America first. And they want to make him look as bad as possible, so they're trying to say, well, things are getting really bad. Not for Americans. So anyway, let's tune into this. This is Mudahar. He's a Canadian, and he's going to give his take on this whole situation, which I think is important to listen to, because he is a Canadian, and this is his sort of sentiment, which I think you all should hear.
Me, Mudahar here. And things are about to get a whole lot bad on Tuesday unless things rapidly change. Now, I don't really talk about politics on my channel. It's not really an important thing. I like to just have fun, goof around, and make you laugh. And sometimes you can come here to learn about cool AI stuff, Linux stuff, VM stuff. Sometimes you'll see me play like a Grand Theft Auto mod that Rockstar hates. Sometimes you'll see me talk about weird stuff in games. Tomorrow I'm talking about Ubisoft, okay? So enjoy looking forward to that one, ladies and gentlemen, because boy, oh boy, do we got some fun stuff to rip on and have fun with.
He's not
but
kidding.
I like to have fun here. I like to have a good time. But sometimes, you got to talk about things that are vent-worthy, if you will, okay? So today, the entire day of Canada, we were just kind of watching the whole news and shit, and waiting to see what this big trade war is going to be looking like.
Yeah, trade
Now,
war.
to be fair with you, I've talked about politics before on this channel, okay? Sometimes talked about really, really heavy stuff. I think a couple months ago with Hassan and the whole Twitch stuff and Ethan Klein and everything, which arguably the stakes there were way higher. Over here, we're just talking about a little old goofy trade war between the three amigos in North America. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is you all know that I'm Canadian. I've lived in Canada 30 years of my entire existence. I came here when I was like 3 months old, so I was still sucking on my mom's nipples while I was trying to get my consciousness going, okay? So Canada is really all I know, and honestly, Canada is probably all I will know until the day that I actually die.
Unless we turn you into a series of states.
I talk about, going to the States and everything, and while I have gone and lived a little bit and seen what the States has to offer, ultimately, at the end of the day, the prospect of truly giving up life in Canada almost seems a little bit douchebaggy by my standards, by anyone's standards. Kind of just like...
Yeah, who would want all those pesky freedoms, like actually having the freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment? Yeah, it's kind of douchey to have all those rights and freedoms, unlike Canada, that basically voted their rights away and are taxed at such an unbelievable rate that it's insane. Absolutely insane, the taxation in Canada.
Kind of just like quitting it and giving up on home, if you will.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, no matter how...
No, I do understand that. It's nostalgia. It's like I've always lived here. No, I can totally respect that. I personally would never, ever live in Canada, but I understand that he has his whole life and he feels a certain sort of way about it. I can respect that.
Cold Canada gets, and it is fucking cold right now.
It is cold.
It is ultimately home. Anyways, I'm not here to make this video super duper patriotic. I just kind of want to talk about, again, these wild trade tariffs that have been coming in.
Right.
So Donald Trump, the current president of the United States, has in fact launched 25% tariffs, 10% on energy, because that's where we know people would really really know how bad things are getting. Yeah, he's launched 25% tariffs, and just a quick primer for anybody who skipped the day in fourth grade. A tariff works in a way where if you put 25% on another country's goods, the people in the country issuing the tariff basically have to pay the premium on it. Let's say you're a company in the United States, you want to buy wood from Canada, okay, which there is a lot of wood being bought. Well, because of a tariff, 25% of that wood gets tacked on by the American government, meaning that the company in the US has to basically pay 25% extra to the government as sort of like a tariff or tax or whatever you will, and that gets passed on to the actual American buying the product. And this just happens vice versa, okay? Now, obviously, there's other different types of tariffs and taxes. I'm a computer engineer, not a fucking economist, okay? The fact that I know this much is already enough, okay?
So, by the way, Trump ran on creating the ERS, which is the External Revenue Service, which is to basically tax other countries for the goods that they purchase from the U.S. or send to the U.S., and to basically eliminate taxes on the American citizen, which is what he ran on, which is what he's doing. And by the way, this tariff didn't come out of nowhere. Trump, he said, hey, Canada, you need to do something about your border. You need to stop this fentanyl. They said, no, we're not going to do that. In fact, they did this grand show against him. We're not going to be intimidated by Donald Trump. They did this whole big show about how they're going to stand up to him. Well, you know what? 25% tariffs. Oh, well, we're going to do 25. Okay, it's 50. Okay, it's 100. No one's going to buy your stuff. I mean, you FAFO, you messed around and now you're going to find out. And the thing is, you only have your leadership to blame. It's not Donald Trump's fault. It's your leaders that you voted in. You voted these people in. The ones that went up against Trump when Trump said, hey, you know what? Help us with the border, close the border, stop the fentanyl coming in. Your leadership said no and wanted to defy him. So guess what? Here's the result. We're going to tariff you. And it may go up. It may go up in the next couple of days. It may be 50%. And guess what? The American people, they may have their groceries go up by 50 cents. Some of them. But at the end of the day, most Americans are not going to be really affected by this because Trump is going to do away with all the different sort of taxes. So it's going to basically even out, if not be in the advantage of the American taxpayer.
That just means that I was awake during that day in public school class, all right? And it's because of all this situation that if you've been following anything on the internet or the news, that, yeah, Canada's fighting back, so is Mexico, and it's turning into an all-out brawl, baby.
I don't understand this delusion. I really don't. Like, the way it's become a brawl. 5% of our GDP between the two of them. We make up over 25% of Canada's economy and 40% of Mexico's economy. I don't understand how you think that's a fight. I really don't. I don't understand this delusion. Is it false bravado? Is it like you don't understand economics? Like you mentioned that you're like, I'm not an economist. Do you not understand numbers? Do you not understand the difference in our power? And an economic standpoint? Like, do you realize what happens if the U.S. stops buying from you? Do you understand what happens to your country? Like, if I were you, I'd be making this video going, man, America's the best country on earth. We really need to get rid of our liberal Democrat politicians.
Maybe. And honestly, Tuesday is going to be a day of reckoning when the market bleeds red. And people are really going to have to reconsider what they can and cannot afford, which is slowly dwindling as time goes on.
What does he think that Canada and Mexico are supplying to the U.S. that's going to crash our economy? And like, what is he thinking that they can like? This is delusion. This is pure delusion. No, the market may go down out of uncertainty, but it's going to rebound because there's going to be there's going to be no difference when it comes to the goods coming in. 15% of our goods come in, 5% from Canada and Mexico combined. So what, you think that American people are just buying lumber in large quantities from Canada? Like, oh man, if we buy a lot of wood. No, here's what's going to happen, and you may not like to hear this. It may be a little bit uncomfortable for a couple weeks, couple months, maybe even a year. But it's going to be a blip compared to what it does to you. Your economy is basically going to collapse if you continue down this route. And while you may not like America, you may not like Trump, you may have Trump derangement syndrome, you may want to blame him instead of yourself for electing the leaders that you did. The fact of the matter is that without us, you can't survive. Your country cannot survive. Your economy can't survive. So, if you want to blame somebody, blame your leadership, or do a video begging to be part of the U.S. Donald Trump has already extended that offer. You can make it serious. Like, hey, we want to be a couple of states. We want to break up into a couple of states. You know, we want these states to have their own state constitution, but, you know, we're willing to become part of the U.S. Honestly, in your position, that's probably what I would do. It's way better than what you're proposing, which is a trade war with the U.S., where you have no hope of winning.
Look, we just got out of a thing known as COVID, all right, the pandemic, which absolutely butt-fucked
4 years ago. We just got out, like, almost half a decade ago.
everyone's wallets. Today, we're about to goatsy the shit out of wallets on Tuesday, and it's really not going to be something that is overly pretty. Like, obviously, as a Canadian, it's not something good to be at the worst possible receiving end of an absolute ass fucking, okay? Yeah. How many Tootsie Roll licks does it take to get to the center of the Canadian economy for Americans? I don't think it's a whole heck of a lot, okay? No. And to be fair with you, it's one of those things where Canadians have come together and made sites like madeinca.ca, where if you're a Canadian, you can just basically look at all the companies you should support and all the companies you shouldn't.
No, that's perfectly cool. No problem with that. You want to have pride in Canada? You want to buy Canadian? Fine. You want to find Canadian. You want to, find your Canadian products. I have no problem with that. I like to buy American products. But don't fool yourself into thinking that you're doing anything. This isn't some kind of revolution. Like, we're gonna hurt the U.S. economy. You're not.
Now, of course, I do genuinely find one silver lining in all this. Apparently, because of all this situation, Canada has become a pretty, Canada has kind of come together with this situation. Like, they really have. Like, I saw a clip of apparently I think it was a hockey game in Ottawa, where literally an American team comes in and Canadians just start jeering together. It's one of those things where somehow in a actual crisis scenario, and crisis for Canadian standards, it's always fun to see people come together. Like, I've never agreed with, like, a lot of the politicians in Ontario, but somehow I'm actually getting behind people that are fighting for a little bit of that Canuck sovereignty, so to speak. Like, it's actually somewhat endearing to see some pride occur over here.
Like, I understand the sentiment, but like, it's sort of like watching somebody going, yeah, I'm rooting for a team. I'm rooting for the bus driver that's careening off of the cliff. It's like we're driving a bus at full speed into the side of a tank. It's like, okay, a tank is a bad analogy because a tank, could face damage. You're running into like a 60-foot brick wall. Like, you're not gonna win this. This sort of like, pride in our sovereignty. What do you have as a Canadian to be proud of? You don't have gun rights. You don't have free speech rights. Your government is about as corrupt as anything that I've ever seen. They're tyrannical. They ban people over speech. They don't understand the difference between men and women. They have that, LGBTQ DEI bullshit. Your government is a bunch of left-wing, corrupt, disgusting, parasitic, subhuman, bottom-feeding pieces of garbage that have ruined your country. And now you're getting behind them because they stood up to Donald Trump? You guys are retarded.
So I don't want to jump too far into it. Apparently the reasons why this warfare is occurring is apparently there is some talk that Canada isn't doing enough to curb the flow of an illegal drug known as fentanyl in...
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to be too hard on this guy because he says he's not an economist and he doesn't really talk about politics, so I don't imagine that he's familiar. But Donald Trump said in no uncertain terms, you need to do more to crack down on your border. And you need to do more to stop the flow of fentanyl into the country. He said the same thing to Mexico. And both of your reactions was, no, we're not going to do that. And so Trump, instead of reacting with a military response, coming into Mexico and basically saying, fuck you, he said, okay, we're going to tariff you and we're going to recoup the cost of your inability to do what you should have been doing in the first place. So I don't understand what this he's crazy. This Donald Trump, he wants us to actually regulate our border
into the United States. I'm going to go to the accusing country, which in this case is the United States, saying that my country is about as bad as those Mexican drug cartels, okay? So if you look at the actual data provided over here, and again, this is from the actual federal government, you'll see that at the southwest border, they've just been flowing in drugs all the way from Mexico. Now, this comes from enterprising pharmaceutical companies in Mexico that are typically called drug cartels all around the world, okay? They're violent, they basically abuse their own country, and they ship a whole bunch of deadly narcotics overseas. Now, of course, if you look at the northern border here in good old Dataland, you'll find out Canada is just not doing enough. Canada's not doing nearly enough as much as its southern counterparts in shipping this terrible poison into the States. I mean, there are some months in Canada where we're just shipping 0 pounds of the stuff, okay? So immediately I wondered over here, I'm like, what can Canada do about this? And no matter who you ask, it's always like Canada can do better to tighten that border. True. But how? It seems like everything's just pretty fine right over here. And to be fair, based on people illegally coming in and out, well, ladies and gentlemen, apparently the data still isn't properly reflective of it. Again, this information comes from the Border Patrol Agency in the old states. So yeah, it's wild when, again, a lot of these narratives and punditry get completely squashed by just raw, hard data. And there's a reason why I don't like to be like a political channel, because at the end of the day, I feel like grifting in it is incredibly easy. All you have to do is just avoid any form of facts and logic and reasoning, and just fucking scream the loudest in here. Or I guess goon the hardest, okay? Like some political channels have recently come out to doing, okay? It's just insane, right? You can't ever argue with somebody that just already has consumed their fucking side of the Kool-Aid, okay? You're basically, it's easier to argue about these facts with people that are in cults like Heaven's Gate, okay?
So, my question is, why did your politicians outright refuse, defy, argue with, say we're gonna do battle with Donald Trump when he was talking about doing more for the border? If it's true that we're already doing the best we can do, why didn't they come out and say that? Because it's bullshit. What you're saying here is absolute bullshit. It is bullshit. You know it, I know it. And by the way, I don't know what year you got that data from, but I understand. Let's see if there's an actual data as of January 7th, 2025. The reality is that a lot of the data that we've seen from the Biden administration is not exactly accurate. We've been dealing with a problem of them underreporting crimes in the U.S. And so, yeah, I would imagine that it's much, much worse on the southern border, but there is still an issue. There is still an issue. on the Canadian side of the border. And so instead of arguing with Trump, fighting him, as their politicians did, they should have agreed to work with him. But you didn't. And now that there's a tariff, you want to call it a trade war. It's not. A war would suggest that you have a chance of winning. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you can go watch the rest of this video. It's very, very interesting how some people get it and some people just don't. And what's abundantly clear is that
goes. Fun fact, spent 4 years in the... Ooh, buddy, you're not going to like how this goes. Fun fact, spent 4 years in the North Dakota oil fields. First year was as a flowback operator. The next 3 years was as a lease operator, or a pumper, as it were. Yep, 4 years of oil field work in the great state of North Dakota. Oofta. So does the United States purchase a lot of Canadian oil exports? Survey says yes. We actually purchase 97% of the oil that you guys export. And that 97% of oil exports from Canada that we purchase in the United States, that accounts for 81% of your guys' entire oil production. Now, for some reason, you got it in your head that we desperately need to purchase this oil from you. Our oil and energy sector is going to die without Canadian exports. No, it's not. There's a very specific reason we purchase so much. It's because you guys sell that oil to us at a discount. Why would Canada sell so much oil at a discount? Well, simply put, it's because about 75% of your guys' total oil production is sour heavy crude. Oh, well, why doesn't Canada just refine their oil, eh? It's because you guys can't. Your refineries can't handle sour crude. And you guys don't even have the money to maintain or build the infrastructure that it would take to transport this oil across your own country. And that's if you were able to refine it in the first place. So the reason why we get to purchase the lion's share of your oil production at a highly discounted rate is because it's raw fucking oil. And sour oil, packed full of H2S gas, which is the second most lethal gas on the planet, right next to what happens when you burn it. So, because it's so heavily discounted, we actually save money by purchasing your exported oil versus just refining our own oil coming out of the Bakken Shale, which accounts for 61% of our oil production, which is sour heavy crude as well. Now factor in that crude oil accounts for 16% of anything that Canada exports, and we buy 97% of that. Who's going to be hurting more economically if we just stop buying that raw oil from you and deal with refining our own shit? Crude oil by itself is a $124 billion a year industry in Canada, by the way. Just selling raw oil down the Keystone Pipeline to American refineries. $124 billion. Canada, you guys do not have the leverage that you think you do economically.
right.
And quite frankly, the United States is tired of playing nice and letting you bend us over the table and going in with no lube economically. So I'll say it again for the people in the back. If you guys just stopped ripping us off, you wouldn't be looking down the barrel of a 25% tariff. We're not.
So it starts to make sense. Mudahar, because he's trying to frame this in a way that it's, oh, this whole thing's ridiculous. He's trying to focus on the fentanyl, which is a part of the problem. The other part is the tariffs that Canada already has on the U.S. And the fact is that there is a trade deficit. So Trump is trying to equalize that. Now, I imagine that if Canada basically took off the tariffs that they have on us, I imagine Trump would probably lessen the tariffs or take them off entirely. Because at the end of the day, I think that's his ultimate goal. I think that he just wants America to be perceived of as being treated fairly. And your country doesn't respect the fact that you're not a sovereign nation. Mudahar, you're not a sovereign country. If we are responsible for 30% of your economy, you're not a sovereign country. You're basically a vassal state. You're the top hat of America. This idea of sovereignty, can you defend yourself if you get involved in a military excursion? Can you defend yourself? No, you would call us for help. So the reality is that all your talk of patriotism and bravado, it's bullshit. And the sooner that you realize that in a number of ways, your country is a bunch of ungrateful leftist shit stains, a bunch of mentally ill retards that vote in the same people that are going to take away their rights and then have the audacity to boo our anthem, you should be on your hands and knees thanking God every day that America is as benevolent as it is. That's my take on it. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.